the original proposal of the Merida Initiative, it was outlined by Bush and Calderon in a meeting in Merida, in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, back in March 2007, where they came up with this idea that they should have a security cooperation package. And the stated intent was, quote, to produce a safer and more secure hemisphere and prevent the entry and spread of illicit drugs and transnational threats. So it's a counter-narcotics package. It's also, as we've seen with Plan Colombia, a way to keep terrorism from entering our country. So that sounds familiar, and it was all stated as well within the context of a much broader package, a much broader plan, which is the Security and Prosperity Partnership. How many people have heard of the SPP? A few people. So the SPP is kind of like NAFTA plus. The SPP, Security and Prosperity Partnership, we don't have time to get into it here, but basically it was taking the three countries of NAFTA, Canada, Mexico, and the United States, and saying we've got this economic relationship, we've got this neoliberal model. To be able to ensure the continuance of this neoliberal economic model, it's going to require the establishment of a security perimeter. Now, that should raise some questions about the model itself, if it requires a security perimeter probably to keep it in force. But that was essentially what they charted out. And so the Merida Initiative is seen as the first concrete step towards that Security and Prosperity Partnership. Establishing a security framework within which we can have this neoliberal model continue and thrive. So that was the initial proposal back in March of 2007. It was to have $1.4 billion of aid, mostly military aid, given to Mexico over the course of 3 years. This represents a tenfold increase in aid to Mexico from the United States. So this is not a slight move. This is a bold new step in this relationship. That was in 2007. At the same time that we saw that this proposal was being put forward, there's a dramatic increase in crime. As most people have probably been reading, if you haven't, you should be reading, that there's a horrendous amount of execution-style murders happening largely by drug cartels operating in northern Mexico, all over the country, but primarily northern Mexico. That was 2007 when they proposed it. Since then, things have gotten worse. 2008, the number of execution-style murders was 5,630. That's more than twice the amount that happened in 2007, which was the record holder up until that point. In 2007, it was 2,700 murders. Just to give some idea of how the pace of these murders is actually quickening, in the last 2 months of 2008, one of these executions was happening every hour on average. So that's the state at which Mexico's security lies. So the contradictory premise of this whole model is Mexico is screwed. Mexico has got a crisis on its hands. Mexico's government does not have control over the country. And Mexico's Security Initiative, which has been largely a military approach to stamp out the supply of drugs and then transfer of drugs through Mexico, has been working. Once again, that should appear to anyone who's got the most basic understanding of logic as a contradiction in terms. It was not understood that way by our Congress, which on June 30th of this last year decided to move forward with the first phase of implementation of this plan. It was in this context of escalating violence in Mexico that they approved a package of $465 million, not just for Mexico, but for Central America as well. 400 for Mexico, 65 million for Central America. Of the 400 for Mexico, there's going to be 358 dispersed in 2008, and the remainder in 2009. Now, of that money, there's about 116.5 million of it was designated to strictly military aid in the terms. Basically, it's to buy some helicopters, some Bell-style helicopters, to be able to do drug interdiction, and a couple of planes for the Navy to also do drug interdiction. And then in addition to that, there's about another 48 million for narcotics control for the police and the military. And then in addition to that, there's some money for enforcement of law, and border security control, and a host of other things. So that's essentially the package that was approved on June 30th this last year. So far, of that 465 million, about 333 million has already been dispersed through 2008. At this point, we don't know going forward what exactly we're going to see, and I'll come back to this a second at the end. Going forward, the budget for 2007 has not yet been announced. 2010, what year are we in? 2010 has not yet been announced. But if there's any indication, there was a proposal back this last year for 300 million more to go to Mexico and 100 million more to go to Central America. That one didn't make it out of committee, but that's some indication of where we might be heading with this thing, which is more of the same. Speak of more of the same, I think it's important to look at this, to do an analysis of the Merida Initiative as a model. As a model of what it's, to basically evaluate it on its stated intentions, which is to combat drug trafficking and drug trafficking related crime. So the best example we have when looking at this model, of course, is Colombia, where we have invested now over $6 billion through Plan Colombia to try to combat drug production and drug trafficking and crime. It follows exactly that same model. It's a military-loaded model. It's a supply-side model. It's a model which says we've got a drug problem in the United States, and the best way of curing that drug problem is by equipping and arming a foreign military to stamp out supply abroad, to stamp out transit abroad. This obviously has not worked in Colombia. That's not news to anyone, but just to make the point clear, in Colombia, perhaps the best evidence of this is the balloon effect. You squeeze here, and coca production happens over here. And we have funded fumigations for since 2000 with Plan Colombia money. That's going to be talked about in a little bit. But that money has been largely wasted. And we can talk about all the human rights implications, but just from a pragmatic point of view, that money has been wasted. Of all the provinces in Colombia, the number that was producing coca when we started Plan Colombia in 2000 was 12. The number producing coca right now is 23. Squeeze. That is the balloon effect. Coca production by the UN's estimates increased by 27% last year. By the United States government's own estimates, twice as much coca was planted in 2007 as was planted in 2000. We are failing by our own estimates, according to our own stated objectives. What makes us think that going forward and choosing a supply-side model in Mexico is going to be any different? The main reason why this won't work in Mexico is for the same. That balloon effect can be applied. You go into Sinaloa, you go into the north of Mexico, and you kill out one cartel, you knock off one cartel. What have you just done? You just created an amazing business opportunity for various competing cartels who would love to compete for that spot, for that market niche. And compete, in drug cartel terms, means deaths. It means violence. When you open up that vacuum of space, you're actually going to see more violence, not less. In addition, you can cut off a supply route. What's to stop another supply route from opening? The basic thesis here, the premise upon which our criticism is placed, is that this is a demand-driven business. So long as there is demand in our country, in the consumer country, there will be supply abroad. Not a single penny of the Merida Initiative puts any money towards demand, towards treating drug problems here at home. People will tell you, of course, well, that doesn't have any pennies in Merida Initiative because it's a foreign aid bill. But at the same time, over the course of the Bush administration, we've actually seen a decrease in money for drug reduction or drug treatment programs. We have studies that show that this is true. We've had them for a while. The RAND Corporation, which is by no means a leftist organization, since 1994 has proven that dollar for dollar, it is far more cost-effective to invest in drug treatment programs at home than to try to stamp out supply or try to do interdiction abroad. It's 10 times more effective to do drug treatment at home, according to the RAND Corporation, than to do interdiction efforts, the style of which we're doing in Mexico with the Merida Initiative. And it's 23 times more cost-effective than trying to stamp out coca in Colombia.